Every generation is criticized, analyzed, chastised, eventually eulogized, but perhaps no generation has had to deal with that crap as much or as often as they do. They tweet, they text, they snap, whatever the hell that means. They're the generation with their heads in the clouds and their faces in their phones, if you talk to older generations. But if you ask them about it, they're the generation that's changing the world. They're millennials. And no one understands them. Hell, even I don't understand them, and I'm one of them. I was born in 1984, and that's the early end of the millennial cutoff. But even for older millennials like me, we don't know what the hell's going on with these kids, because we're not quite the same as those millennials. I mean, we identify just as much with the previous generation, the Generation Xers, music videos, Beavis and Butthead, Winona Ryder. I mean, I identify a lot more with that stuff than I do with Instagram, freaking Reddit. Guys, I literally have no idea what Reddit is. And so today, all this is coming to a head. Today, I'm going to answer all these questions we have about all these kids. Who are they? Where do they come from? What do they want from us? Will they ever just go away? Why do they love Chipotle so much? And I'm going to get these answers straight from the emotionally fragile, mostly unemployed horse's mouth. Join us on this very special edition of the Manthology Show as I talk life, careers, politics, and Chipotle with actual goddamn millennials. Hello, is this a millennial?
Yes, this is a millennial. My name is Jeff.
Is that your real name?
Yes, it is my real name.
Okay, what year were you born, Jeff?
I was born in 1994.
Okay, the math checks out on that. You are a millennial, at least by age, but as you well know, millennials are very untrustworthy. So I'm going to have to ask you a series of questions here. Just some basic, these are for filing purposes. It's nothing too complex. We just want to make sure you're a millennial. Are you okay with that, Jeff?
I feel like it's going to be okay. Yeah.
What do you do? Are you a student?
I actually go part-time to community college, and I work at Target.
Oh, okay. So you're in retail.
Yeah, retail.
Okay, so you're the backbone of America.
Yeah, we're trying.
All right, what's your favorite candy? M&M's or Ritalin?
I'm Ritalin.
Ritalin. Okay. Well, then that definitely checks out. You are certainly a millennial. Have you ever flunked a class, Jeff?
Yes. Mostly math.
Okay. Well, if you could, please list all the reasons it was your teacher's fault.
They never directed the class right, they didn't respect my feelings and my space when giving me homework, and I didn't want to do it. Your space
is very important.
I have better things to do than the homework, like nothing.
Right, of course. So Jeff, as you well know, these have been divisive times here in 2016. A lot of needless shooting, senseless death, tragedy every day on the news. How are you coping with Harambee's death?
Harambee was definitely a huge point of contention for me in particular. And, after all of the drinking, I think I made some internet memes, some jokes. Roses are red, violets are blue.
Okay.
I miss Harambee and Harambee misses me too.
Yeah.
Things like that, but really it's been hard.
It's been hard. I can hear that in your voice. I can hear the sincerity. And I'm sorry to hear that. But what I want to tell you, I think it's best that we come together as a society to mourn together. And also, look, I know the answers are never easy. You have to go get them prescribed by your therapist.
I think that's the important thing about Harambee is, if he had never gotten shot, he would have never brought us together
that's right.
Like we are right now. Yeah,
that's right. All right, Jeff.
Yes.
I'm just going to cut to the quick here. You're a goddamn millennial.
Yeah.
Do you feel as a millennial that you are misunderstood by society at large, or do you feel like people have a pretty good peg on what you're about?
Sometimes the millennial, the idea of it, I think that it's just the same kind of generational gap you would see before, the millennial generations, people from the 40s didn't really understand people from the 70s. But I feel like the internet and just the things millennials are about, technology and all of these social justice and, shootings and the contention in the United States, as you've mentioned, just really puts an even larger gap between the millennials and the non-millennials. So I think sometimes the jokes are right. I look at my peers and go, yeah, they are kind of funny. But other times, I feel a little misunderstood.
Yeah. Well, because I agree with you that I think millennials, it seems like, I'm not wrong in this. You guys get made fun of a lot.
Yeah.
You're the butt of a lot of jokes, as our questionnaire proved it. I didn't write that, by the way. Yeah, I didn't write those questions. However, I feel like you guys get a bad rap. And actually, I'm technically a millennial. And so, yeah, I think we get a bad rap. I'll include myself in that. But I do think that although a lot of those differences are just common generational things, like the Gen Xers had Nirvana and fanny packs and stuff in the 90s that, the older generations didn't understand MTV in the same way that they don't understand, Twitter or Instagram, right? Like this stuff happens every generation. But it does seem like, as you said, there's something about millennials that I feel like it rubs people the wrong way. What can you put your finger on what it is exactly that makes millennials so easy to pick on?
I think it's because before, like, I don't even want to get into gender politics, too deeply. But I think before, in the other generations, there was a lot more solid lines, like Republican, Democrat, boy, girl, good, bad, things like that. Even in 80s movies and media and things like that, it was very easy to tell sides. Now I think a lot of the lines are blurring because a lot of media is more about, the anti-hero, the lovable, villain, Breaking Bad and things like that. But I feel like just a lot of the lines have blurred. So it's really easy for, the older generations to make fun of us because, it's just like, oh, that guy over there, he thinks he's, he wants to, wear dresses and things like that. And it's just before that would be comedy. Now
right.
Us as millennials are taking that really seriously. And it's just a division there. It's really hard to pin down because before sitting, inside on your computer all day was, you'd make fun of them, D&D, playing on that Atari, like, that's funny. Mm-hmm. Now it's a career. It's what all of us are doing. And so it's just it's a shift that's so absolute in culture that it's very hard to pin down, to understand even.
Yeah, I tell people sometimes that I think one of the big differences culturally from now to the 1980s, for example, is, in the 80s, nerds knew they were nerds. Mm-hmm. And they were nerds. You think of a movie like Revenge of the Nerds, that was nerds back then. Yeah. But now everyone's a nerd. Nerds are kind of mainstream, like nerds have taken over, and it's largely due to the things we were talking about, like, these things that were new back then are now commonplace. You grow up with video games now, you grow up with computers, they're not like a pocket protector type thing. No, there's something everyone uses. And to the credit of millennials, I think millennials are changing the world in a way that does make older generations a little bit uncomfortable. The idea of a sharing economy, things like Uber, things like, millennials aren't into owning things. The idea of America for so many generations was, I'm going to have a house, I'm going to marry a woman, or a man if you are a woman. Your point is you're going to get married. You're going to have 2.5 kids was the average. You're going to move to the suburbs, right? You're going to have a white picket fence and you're going to own a car. Like, that was the American dream.
Yeah. See, that adds up. Yeah.
But millennials seem to be rejecting that definition of it. And I don't even know that they're rejecting it as much as they're accepting the reality that's been handed to them, that doesn't exist anymore. So now millennials have to, in this new economy, in this new world, this new job market, they have to kind of build their own American dream. And I feel like there's not a lot of empathy from the older generations who don't realize what millennials have to go through.
If I can cut in there, I work. I don't mind sharing, how much I make an hour, if that's okay. I make $12.50 an hour. Yeah. I work at Target. I stock and I work the electronics department. And I've been apartment hunting on that salary, with a friend, who makes a compliment. He works at a pizza restaurant. He does the delivery, because I'm 22 now, and that's where I work. I have a community college education. I can't afford a place on my own, like, even with a friend, like, we did the math. We had to, like, stack up 4 of us together just to even get a place to live. And that can be really difficult, when people are telling me, oh, this is the American dream, this is this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I actually can't, I live with my parents,
Yeah.
I sleep all day, because what else is there to do? When Target doesn't want me to come in, like, where am I going? I learned, actually, to mention what you said before. I was, in my community college education, I took a culture class, because liberal arts, those are important to us millennials. Mm-hmm. And we learned that there is a difference between a collectivist culture, like, India or China or things like that, which have a lot of sharing and socialist ideas, and an independent culture like America. But the general thought process of it is that every independent culture that values getting your own car, getting your own place, doing everything on your own, compartmentalizing, your home life with your school life and your work life, all those being separate things. Those lines always start to blur, and every society, I guess the word is, moves backwards, kind of swings back to a more collectivist point of view because it makes more sense. And that's why a lot of us, want to vote for Bernie Sanders and things like that, because that's that whole idea of socialism is just so mocked because of, the Cold War in the 80s and the stigma behind that name. Right. But it's very important to us because it's the only way we can see to attain that American dream you're talking about is together.
Yeah. So, and like you said, I think it also speaks to the new values of a new generation. I think every generation has different values. But so what do you think the millennial ideal is? Like, what do millennials care about?
I think above all else, it's from what I've talked to with my friends, I think we all just want to make it somehow. There's just this the resounding feeling of just depression among my entire generation of no one really knows what they're doing. They're all just kind of kicking around, hoping things will work out for the best. There's no goal. There's no concise, place to end up. And so we're all just,
there's no path like there used to be either.
No, going to college, a lot of friends I know dropped out of college because it wasn't going anywhere. And after, I worked at Target, like I said, there's people there who have 4-year degrees who studied in Europe, who have these degrees, these tangible, money paid degrees that they have to pay off now. And, they still work at Target. Mm-hmm. So it's just really hard because once that fails, what is there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's the most educated generation and unemployed generation.
Yeah, I'm not going to say, I have the highest education or anything like that, but I feel like I could contribute to society in a really big way. But, what way? No one listens to millennials. No one cares. And, none of us care about each other. I just see all these, upper 30s, 28, 29, 30-year-old couples just walking around, and they have the car, they have the house. And I'm thinking about jealousy, honestly, because I can't afford that. There's no advancement opportunities in the job I have. There's no other jobs to get. So really, I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years and 10 years. All I can say is it just feels like it's falling apart around me.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Jeff. I hope you're dealing with that okay in a healthy way.
None of us are, alcohol.
Yeah. Prescription drugs, alcohol.
Whatever the doctor will give me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing about millennials is they're so and I'm not making fun of mental illness because I know there's statistics that say millennials are by and large depressed.
Yeah, no, I have clinical depression too, so you're right on the money right
so
there.
See, I'm not making fun. I'm just pointing out pretty much most millennials are on prescription drugs for mental.
Yeah.
And I think they get kind of made fun of for that. But when you think about all the things that they have to deal with, waking up, it's not like our parents and their parents who, when they woke up in the morning, they knew, okay, if I keep going into this factory every day for the next 30 years, I'm going to be able to retire with a nice little retirement, and I'll have a house, and my kids will be in school. There was a path laid out that they could go to sleep easy knowing was there for them, right? I mean, of course it was hard work, but they at least knew their hard work would lead to something. The difference is we are working hard too, and we have no idea where it's leading. And because of that, we've also got to become, I heard this great term, the slash generation. No one is just one thing anymore. You have to be a writer / designer / blogger / this / that. You have to have 27 different skills to even be considered for a job. And that's exhausting mentally.
I work anywhere from 30 to 40 hours a week, which, back, in the 80s, that would be considered, full time. I'd be working. I'd be having enough to pay for my food, my family, my insurance. Now I work that, and, I live paycheck to paycheck. And if anything goes wrong with my body, I'm in debt then.
Yeah. Well, you goddamn millennials talk like Marxists. You know that. And that's probably why your parents are so disappointed in you. It's going to be okay, Jeff. And I'm not just telling that because you're a very special millennial snowflake who's very unique and individual and different from everyone else and special in your own way. I'm not just telling you that because your parents have to tell you that because it's 2016 and you're a millennial. I'm telling you that because it's true. You're very special, Jeff. And I want to thank you for spending your time with me today.
Yeah. You have a wonderful day, Derek.
Oh, God, not another one. Hi, is this a goddamn millennial?
It sure is.
What the hell is your name?
My name's Kamara. I run a YouTube show called Subsonic Sparkle. So you kind of hit the millennial jackpot as far as getting annoying millennials, because I do the most millennial thing you can do.
Oh, wow. You are the quintessential millennial.
You got the perfect annoying millennial.
All right, so you are, like we've established, you may or may not be a goddamn millennial. I'm just going to take your word for it since you're British. What do you care about as a millennial? Like if you had like a couple things that you would say matter to you in your life, what are those things?
As a millennial, things, I guess, just explaining myself to other people is something that's huge to me. Like, if you can articulate yourself, you can do anything.
That's the most millennial philosophy I've ever heard. I like that.
It sure is. So if you teach yourself how to talk, if you teach yourself how to explain your feelings in as much detail as possible to the point that they overwhelm somebody, so they can't even come back at you.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's something that's important to me, as well as the usual stuff, family and money and what have you.
So money matters to you, because a lot of people would say millennials don't care about money. They're
Well, I guess it doesn't matter to me because I have no money, so I have no relationship with money.
So you just left university. What are you going to start doing?
I just started a job at a grocery store that I'll be working at pretty soon. While I'll be doing that part time while working on my videos and trying to get them out regularly. Okay. So I'll have like two incomes from Patreon and my work. Okay. So we'll see how I can balance that.
All right. So yeah, that's something I touched on with some other people I've talked to, is that millennials are forced to be a lot more creative about how they make money these days.
Right. That's the information era. We're living in an environment that's sort of conducive to geniuses, because you can learn anything you want to as long as you understand how to get that information. But we're also living in an environment that's conducive to lazy slackers with no agency. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to tell them apart sometimes. Right. You really can't tell. Sometimes they're both. So you need to be creative sometimes and throw yourself at a pursuit that you don't know where it's going to land you.
So as someone who's just now starting your kind of adult life journey, are you intimidated by does it scare you that things are different and you're going to have to be creative and maybe struggle and find different ways to earn a living? Does that intimidate you, or do you kind of embrace that?
It's, life with school just got so rote at some point that I'm kind of open to any sort of wild change. Like, nothing could get that much worse as long as I'm not studying German. Yeah,
wait till you hit your 30s, and then you'll wish that life was. You'll see how life can get worse.
That's none of my business. I'm 19. That's completely out of my jurisdiction.
So you're 19 years old. You are firmly a millennial. In fact, you may even be on the young end of the scale. Do you feel like society understands you? You said one of the things that you care about is explaining yourself. Do you feel like you need to explain yourself and who you are and what matters to you? Are you on the defensive?
I guess I can do that for my people, and everybody else can. I don't need to interact with them as long as I can establish my people that I can understand and understand me. Then I can operate. So
you're weaving a tapestry around. You're like a moth. You're knitting together this cocoon of millennials who understand things like Snapchat and Reddit and all these things that millennials do, and that's your purview. That's where you're spending your time. Is that correct?
but honestly, I'm pretty disconnected from that too. Like it's hard to say. It's a pretty weird identity, and that's probably the thing that that millennial is the most millennial thing about millennials, that having this sort of nebulous identity, but you don't fit in with everyone. You can't ever. So there's a lot of picking sides, and
yeah,
it's odd.
So at least here in the States, there seems to be this. Millennials get picked on a lot by older generations, and I know this is kind of a constant in every generation. You know, every generation doesn't understand the next generation, but I feel like the gap is a little bit further than normal between millennials and everyone else. Does it feel that way to you in Europe as well?
Maybe if I interacted with more people, but maybe people in my life will tell me, like, "What are you doing? I don't understand you. I don't understand your what you do." And then, you know, depending on how much I value them, I may let them in if I'm feeling up to it. But sometimes I kind of like the idea of sort of being out of the loop of a lot of people and kind of being off the grid.
It's
like there's something liberating about that.
That's something interesting that I'm starting to sense from talking to other millennials. And this is all, listen, everything on this podcast we're talking about is anecdotal. All right, here's another lesson for you. Facts are for losers, okay? If you can't judge it from your gut, then it's not worth judging or validating. So listen, everything on this podcast has been anecdotal, but it seems to me, talking to other millennials, this is a very isolated generation. They're not into like going to the club on a Friday night and drinking. They're more into like, I'm going to sit at home and watch Netflix and eat pizza. Does it seem like there's less of a social interaction element? And is that maybe because of the role social technology plays in their lives?
Yeah, that definitely has. Because nowadays, everyone has followers, and we all present ourselves on the internet, and it's a lot easier. You don't really have to put yourself out there to, you know, make a name for yourself on the internet, whereas going out in a club or going out to meet people can be pretty difficult for some people. Like, if you can craft yourself very meticulously on the internet to show exactly what you want to show people. So that probably plays a role in everybody getting more isolated.
It's interesting.
They're more isolated, but they're also they're still connected in a way, just in a very different way than makes sense to a lot of people.
So the whole social element for this generation is very different than even my generation, which I'm still technically a millennial. And that's part of the reason that I'm doing this show and talking to younger millennials, is because I feel like there's a gap even between those of us born in the mid 80s and those born even 5-6 years later. You know, I didn't grow up with a cell phone. I didn't grow up with the internet.
It's all has to do with the information age. Has changed everything.
Do you think one of the things that I do kind of see their point when they criticize millennials, older people, really anyone, when they talk about how millennials tend to be a little oversensitive. Do you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so it's not just me. You would say that although being sensitive to things is a good thing, there is a line there where when we're getting offended by, you know, some harmless comedian or TV show.
Absolutely. This is a very real phenomena going on the internet, where people define themselves so strongly by the things that they love that the idea, I think that has a lot to do with us curating our own communities as well, because you find that people all think like you, and then you kind of subconsciously start to think that this is how the world works,
right? And
then when somebody has this brand new perspective, you take it as a personal insult, as opposed to just saying, all right, we come from different worlds, we can still respect each other even if we have these varying ideals and what have you, have different interests. And then some people will just define themselves by kind of frivolous things that they like want to think of as untouchable, that nobody can feel differently about.
It's interesting.
It destroys discourse kind of on the internet.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there when you talk about how people identify with the things they love. Millennials really tend to identify their hobbies or their lives for a lot of it.
I guess I love cartoons. I'm walking around with like a cartoon on my shirt and kind of like plaster it all over my room. This is my identity, and all these other various things. But I don't feel the need to hold other people to that standard.
But I can certainly see why when that's the trend, when people are identifying. I noticed it certainly working at Classic Game Room. Video games were a lot of our viewers' lives. So if I said something negative about a video game, they took that as like a personal attack. And so they kind of respond in kind. When you're viewing people as the identity and not the person, it kind of dehumanizes people in a way. And I think that leads to maybe a lot. Would you say that's part of like the reason internet discourse, like you said, is kind of deteriorated?
That for sure. Also, the anonymity of it all. Because things have gotten so impersonal that you don't feel that responsible for the things you say, because it's just a drop in the pond. So all these little bad ideas you've had in the back of your head, you have no filter on the internet because you don't feel like there's any repercussions. And really there isn't, because when you're on some board or some forum, nobody can hold you accountable for the things you say. So you get those two things together, all these people from all over the world with varying ideals, and none of them are being held accountable for what they say. And that's how the internet ended up the way it is.
If you could go back in time and give advice to a prior generation while they were in their prime and kind of coming up in the world, is there a generation that you would choose, and what advice would you give as a millennial to kind of change that generation? Or do you look at prior generations and compare them to yours at all?
It's hard to say, because people will do this frequently, but they'll always do it with rose-tinted glasses. Yeah. I think every generation has had its huge issues, and now people know more than they have before. It's easier to learn things. So just through that alone, we're kind of in a better state than we've ever been. But it's hard to really say what was good and what was bad about previous generations, because it's usually just that the scales have been tipped in one person or another person's favor. So it's tough.
Plus, you don't have encyclopedias anymore to look it up.
Right, exactly. The 90s, somehow things seem to just work out in the 90s. Maybe that's just me having not really taken part in the 90s, but looking back, things just seemed to work out. Everything was going through a boom.
Oh, man. So, see, that's really strange. You saying that you don't really identify at all with the 90s. It's an interesting thing for me that I really identify with that decade because I grew up in it. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, but I really came into like my own in the 90s. That's kind of when I was a teenager.
Right.
And I feel like our generation, and I'll include the older millennials at least in this, we really identify with our childhood in a way that I'm not so sure our parents do. You know, I'm 32 years old and I still watch, Ren and Stimpy.
Right.
And I still cherish it in a way that, like, my dad, when he was 32, wasn't still watching Yogi Bear. Do you feel like we're, and this is actually part of the Manthology Show's kind of mission statement. Right. It's like,
as you covered on the show, the manly ideal has really evolved.
Yeah.
Where people don't want to let go of the things in their past, because being a kid was the easiest and happiest time where everything made sense. It's such an easy reference point. And also, there's not really that pressure to leave behind things that you used to love. Yeah. Nowadays, we're at the beginning of the 2010s, we had this huge nostalgia boom where everyone was realizing how fun it is to take things from your past and share them with the new generation in the form of terrible reboots that everybody hates. But that's one of the biggest changes, where people don't feel that pressure to leave behind the things that they used to love. And I love growing up with the things that I loved as a kid, seeing which things still kind of stand the test of time. That's when you really know how meaningful something is.
And maybe the reason we're holding on to our childhood in a way our parents didn't is because our adulthood has been, as we kind of talked about, much more challenging.
It was a lot. That's because I guess for older generations, it was a lot more streamlined. Yeah. It was very simple what you did moving forward. You get to a certain age, you try and get out of the house, you try and find someone to settle down with, you try and save up money so you can get the perfect place, and then you raise your kids to do the same. And then that kind of deteriorated. That model stopped working for everyone.
Yeah, millennials are changing the world. And I think that's...
Yeah, they're taking over the world.
Yeah. And
there's no stopping it.
No, and I think that's part of the reason they get picked on a lot, is there's certainly probably a resentment from the baby boomers who, let's be honest, the Gen Xers never really took over the world. They kind of like... The baby boomers are still kind of running the show, or held on for a lot longer time than the millennials who seem to just be like grabbing it by the balls and just like changing everything. The sharing economy and Uber, and people don't really own anything anymore. Everything's streamed on Netflix, and I don't need a car because I'll just get a ride. And like that's one thing that really made me upset when I was listening to the podcast on millennials not learning how to drive. I have made no effort to learn how to drive.
and I apologize for that, but I just can't put the thought out of my mind of the taxes and the insurance and the gas and where would I go?
That's amazing.
What would be the point?
That's so amazing.
Over here, we have trains everywhere. If I want to go anywhere, let's take a train. It's cheap.
Yeah, it's a little different in Europe where you guys have fantastic public transit pretty much everywhere. In the States, and part of it is, the States are so large that, it's a little more difficult to do that. But yeah, our public transit still is just in terrible shape. So over here, when you hit 16, it used to be like that was the biggest moment of your life, was like getting your driver's license and driving around with your friends. Your dad buys
you a truck and
oh god, it was
it's a coming of age thing.
Yeah, and that doesn't
there
seem to
was
exist.
a lot of like coming of age motifs back then throughout like the 30 years ago or so that have kind of deteriorated. Like coming of age today is a very personal thing that is hard to put like a label on.
And it's a little different.
Whereas back then you'd have all these specific milestones.
Yeah. And just like jobs and the economy that millennials have to deal with, it's probably going to be a little different for everyone. And there is no set definition.
For sure.
All right. I think what we've learned here today in this conversation is that you may be a millennial, but you're still an okay guy. And I think
that's right.
And I think if anything, that the goal of this podcast has been nebulous and never shifting, largely because I don't even know what it is either. As you well know, I'm not the kind of guy with a plan. But I would like to think that after listening to this show, people will think, that goddamn millennial from the UK, he's an okay guy. Because that's what I think.
Great.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, one more. We can get through this. Just shut up. Tell them they're special. We can get through this. All right, who the hell are you?
I am the great Ryan with an O in his first name, also known as Scribble Scrabble from Arcadia, if you're one of our...
Oh, the YouTube channel.
Fans. Yeah, the YouTube channel that talks about various things.
Hold on. A YouTube channel that talks about video games.
Oh, yeah, video games, other nerd cultures. We're just breaking new ground here, I tell you what.
What kind of a nerd loser is a YouTube guy who talks about video games?
I don't know.
I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, who would do that even? Who even likes frogs?
Listen, how old are you?
I'm 25.
You were born when?
1991.
Okay, so so the math checks out. You are a millennial, if in fact you are what you say you are. But for filing purposes, our legal team, I'm just going to ask you a few questions just to make sure you're a millennial. Are you okay with that?
Yes. Is that the first question?
That was the first question.
Okay. How am I doing?
You're doing fine. Although I am a little suspicious of your millennialness, but that's why we're going to do this. I don't trust anyone because I grew up watching the X-Files. So we're going to make sure that you're a millennial. The first question I have for you: have you ever flunked a class?
Yeah, it was banned.
Okay. If you could, please list all the reasons it was your teacher's fault.
I was a percussion student in this band class, and I was a free spirit. I had long hair. I wore denim jackets to class. I was the student that would walk into class and the teacher would start sweating. Oh, geez. I would also do things like hit other instruments with my drumsticks. Some people weren't into that. That's call me crazy. But
so you are a disruptive goddamn millennial.
If you want to label me with such terms, then...
Well, it's my show, so that's how we're going to...
Okay, fine.
Okay, so that's how it's going to go. Are you a student? You in college?
Yes, I'm both those things.
What's your
student
major?
And in college. English major.
How many times a week would you say you eat Chipotle?
I had Chipotle yesterday.
Of course you did. Okay, and you also say you're an English major.
Yeah.
Might also be nice to make some friends at Chipotle.
Okay. Wow.
I'm just trying to offer some advice here to a young millennial whippersnapper.
I've got Chipotle friends. I've got coffee shop friends. I'm really casting my proverbial lines out there.
Okay, so you're setting up a foundation for yourself. That's good to hear.
Yeah. Building from the ground up.
All right. Have you had an anxiety attack this week?
Not that I know of.
Have you had an anxiety attack today?
No, isn't today part of this week?
Have you had an anxiety attack in the last 5 hours?
No. You're just getting closer. You're getting closer to the day.
Are you having an anxiety attack right now?
I don't know, Derek.
Okay. All right. Now you're definitely a millennial. Okay. That we can let me check in with. Yep, they're nodding. Okay, you're good.
Okay.
All right, Ryan. Now that we've established that you are in fact a goddamn millennial, I want to know, like, what is the normal? Give me the average day for you as a whippersnapper millennial.
Well, the first thing that happens is I wake up at the crack of 10 a.m. And then I have to
So you get up early, yeah.
Can I tell a story here? Can I tell a story? Or are you going to interject the whole time?
Well, I have to keep you guys on track with all your ADHD.
Social commentary. See, now I'm lost.
Typical day in the life. Check the notes.
Wake up at 10 a.m. Okay, wake up the crack at 10 a.m. and I have this mental struggle if I should go to my first class or not. And I usually do. Okay. But there are some days where I just go back to sleep. And then I have this 2-hour gap from one class to the next where I usually try to scramble together what I forgot to do or neglected to do for homework for the next class, which is about John Milton's poetry. And then I go home and convince myself that I'm doing something until I go to bed.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, and sometimes between these activities, I eat Chipotle.
You must be exhausted at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Okay. So 10 a.m. is pretty early for you, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually with you on that one. Is that so? When you schedule classes, you're making sure to not go earlier than 10 a.m.
10 a.m. is like the barrier. I applied for graduation yesterday, and the person's like, graduation's at 8 a.m. And I was like, do I even need to graduate? Like, do I even really need this?
Well, now that you're making friends at Chipotle, you might not need to. So
yeah, we could just
2 birds with 1 stone. You can get some sofritas, and you set yourself up for the future.
So do you go to Chipotle? The tables have turned, Derek.
I mean, I do, but it just seems to me, and we can get into this.
Interesting.
I go to the Chipotle, all right, and every time I go to the Chipotle, there's a line out the door, and I'm the oldest person in it. So there's something about what is it about Chipotle? It's like everything millennials love wrapped in a tortilla of responsibly raised crap. I don't understand.
You're showing your age here, Derek, because all the cool happening hip kids, they don't order this burrito stuff anymore. That's old hat.
Oh, they don't.
No, all the new fashion fangle whippersnappers trundle in there and they get a bowl.
Oh,
they
the
say,
bowls.
give me a bowl. And the rumor has it that you actually get more food with the bowl. But I refuse to get the bowl, Derek, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked. It's because I am fascinated with the idea of eating the utensil in which I'm already eating the food.
Yeah.
Like, ever since I saw Willy Wonka as a kid in my crappy VHS, like, fast-forwarded commercials, after he sings, like, that song and he eats the cup, I was like, that's the best. You'll never have to clean up.
Yeah.
Like, and then, so, yeah, why would you want to, like, have a bowl there? You're looking at that and you're like, this is just wasted potential.
This is okay. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to interrupt our Chipotle conversation just for a second. It seems like you, Ryan, are a millennial much in the same way I'm a millennial, in that you're technically a millennial, but you got some Gen X stuff going on here.
Yeah.
So maybe what we can do here is you and I can come together as a brain trust and try to figure out what the younger, more prototypical millennials. So what is it about these kids in the Chipotle? Is it just is it the inspirational quotes on the recycled brown bags? Is that what it is?
I think it's a mixture of, you go to Chipotle and you think everything is safe, like you
it's
go
the
in here,
safe zone of fast food.
You go in here, and I think I had on my bag yesterday a quote that said something like, and the bubbles tickled my ear. and I was sitting there like staring at this bag like it's an ugly person's, shield, right? I'm sitting there staring at it like, why do they put this on the bag? And then it's like, it has this quote, then it's like, Jessica, age 17. Like, we're supposed to be wowed that a 17-year-old can like affix a sentence together, and then that sentence needs to be put on a bag. And I think it's kind of like a reflection of like, art is an important asset. We'll put it on our bags. It's kind of like this parroting of ideas where it's like, I think that the world should be more green. And Chipotle's like, we're green. And it's like, I think we need to have inspirational quotes on our bags. And Chipotle's like, we got that.
Yeah, it's like this convergence of all this crap that millennials care about. And I'm not saying it's not important crap, but it's stuff that the difference is millennials like to let everyone know they care about this crap. And they make sure to tell everyone that they're into the recycled brown bags with the inspirational quotes.
That's why they got quotes on the bags.
That's why there's quotes.
You don't even have to say anything, and people will know.
And they put the quotes on the bags because it seems to me these kids, they need constant reassurance. And so they go into Chipotle and, the pork is responsibly raised and meets their antibiotic protocol. Like, who the hell cares, right? But then
I love the idea of responsibly raised pork. Like they set the scenario of like the trolley like in front of a pig, and it's like, if you pull this lever, only one person will die. And it's like if he doesn't pull the lever and like the 5 people died, it's like, this pig's not responsible enough. Send him back.
So yeah, but then they feel weird, like, because they know they get picked. Millennials get picked on a lot for being millennials, but then they get their bowl. And the napkin's got a little quote from Bill, who's 15. It says, "Don't worry, we're okay. We're doing the right thing."
Because you got the ball.
Yeah, it's this concept. It's the pat on the back that millennials so often, it seems to me, need. And also, like you said, it seems they're finding ways to get more food for less with the bowl. So this just fascinates me because I have never gone to the Chipotle down the street and seen anyone there older than me. Never. It's never happened. And
you should like get your mammy and pappy and be like, we're gonna go on an adventure today, folks, and take them to Chipotle.
We're gonna go to this millennial utopia.
yeah, where there is no ceiling, the vents can just be seen. I have a topic.
All right, what do you want to talk? What do you want to talk about?
I don't like the term millennials
Because
Derek, the millennial, like saying that this generation is called the millennials says nothing about their interests or their accomplishments. Whereas previous generations, like the greatest generation or the baby boomers, or even like the radically named Gen X. Like that, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has like hot rotten teenagers from Dimension X. Like it would be an honor to be bestowed Gen X. And it seemed like there was a time where people were trying to figure out what to call us. And we had Gen Y, which I didn't like because then we're just a subsidiary of like Gen X, the thing that just follows.
So the sequel.
And then for a moment of time, I swear that there was the I generation with like the little I, like an iPod. And it's like, that's bad because you're branding an entire, like there are kids in China that were like, they've never touched an I product.
Except for the ones they made.
Oh. Yeah. We just got a little Banksy Simpsons right there. Like, oh, too far. So yeah, like I didn't like that. And now we're just branded the millennials.
Yeah.
And that doesn't say anything about who we are, like, what we've done. It just says that we were around when time switched. Whatever, like this non-important year switch from 1999 to 2000. And that is such a drastic moment that like the ripples have caused our entire generation to be known as the millennials.
So, all right. So let's dig into that. It doesn't say anything about you. Who are you? What do you care about? What have you done?
I think that like we are arguably the most technologically privileged generation that's like sprung up so far, you know. Even Gen Xers, like, while they saw like, you know, the internet rise from its like ooze, you know, and become something like malleable and like solid, it didn't shape how they think about things or how they view the world. Whereas I'm not saying that like the internet or like the Nintendo came about like right when we were born, because it definitely came before, but like we are the first generation to be surrounded by all these electronic things. And that has very much changed how we view things. And like, so I think our generational name should reflect that in some way. Like the E generation doesn't got enough snap or pizzazz, you know? So like, I don't know, like here I might like betray my affinity for cyberpunk, but what if we were called like the modem gen or something, you know, like something that shows that we were influenced by these things.
That's, I think, the key difference for me is, you know, I grew up without this stuff, even though I'm technically a millennial. You know, I didn't encounter the internet until like high school. And I remember the first time that I encountered it, we actually had a class about it, right? No millennial would have a class about the internet. The internet has shaped who they are. I learned about it and I incorporated it into my life, and now I use it every day. I've made my living on it. But it didn't shape who I am in the way that it did the younger millennials who grew up with it. I think there's definitely something to that.
And you can also say, well, like, oh, well, this will just continue to like exacerbate as the other generations like grow up. It's like, that's true. Like whatever Generation Z is going to be called, you know, which is a problem too, because like it's actually called Gen Z right now. And like, what are they going to do after that? Like Gen AA, like, but like we are the ones that have been like molded by it the most. And like, well, it's certainly true. It's like they are also going to grow up surrounded by this stuff. They weren't at like this turning point where it's like we could choose to go outside and play, or we could also equally choose to stay inside and like involve ourselves in this, like, I don't want to say evolutionary process. That's a bit too dramatic, but like involve ourselves in this expanding technological sphere, you know?
You know, I set out on this journey not to mock and not to laugh at. All right, not entirely to mock and laugh at, but more importantly, to learn. I set out on this quest to learn about millennials. I think we've learned a lot about millennials here today. We've learned that millennials are smart, very smart, perhaps the most educated generation in history. You can ask them all about it while they're making your latte. We've learned that millennials are kind of sad. A lot of them deal with mental health issues, from anxiety to depression to that feeling they get when their batteries go red. And we've learned that millennials aren't just changing the world. They've already changed it. That's the other thing we've learned about millennials. Despite all the things they get picked on for, despite all the ways they admittedly irritate the hell out of everyone, millennials have already given us a lot. And the best is yet to come. And the coolest thing about millennials is that, by and large, they're not doing this stuff out of greed, but out of a desire to do the right thing. These millennials love to do the right thing. That's why they eat at Chipotle. Actually, no, we did not learn why they eat at Chipotle. Some mysteries remain with these goddamn millennials, but no good story answers every question. And maybe in the next 5-10 years, we'll learn even more about these millennials as they get older, as their generation matures, as their worldviews continue shaping the real world. Perhaps then we'll have more answers. But until then, I'm content with knowing that, yeah, they may listen to stupid music, they may use stupid lingo, they may be entitled and annoying and oversensitive and annoying and just really, they're very annoying sometimes, but they're good kids, you know, and they're navigating a new world for which there is no roadmap the best way that they can. So the next time you see a millennial in its native habitat, don't be afraid to look at it, to smile at it, and maybe even say hello to it. Don't worry, it won't hear you anyway. It's probably on its phone. Thanks again to Jeff and Kamara and Ryan, and to all the millennials I spoke with during my exhaustive research. And thank you for listening to this very special edition of the Manthology Show.